National Arts has been made possible by Low Real Estate Group at Path Realty, proudly serving the Shepherdstown community in West Virginia for nearly a half century, providing commercial, leasing, rental, marketing, and consulting. Hi, I'm Mike Baker, and welcome to National Arts. This Emmy-winning television series features some of the finest visual and performing artists in the tri-state area. Season 2 promises to be equally rewarding as we feature highlights from chamber music festivals, classical artists, poets, playwrights, cartoonists, stained glass window artisans, even a Broadway actor. So without further ado, let's get started. Sam Auxier is a radio host, successful podcaster, and one of the legends of the sport of drag racing. His 1969 Mustang Ultrastock is an iconic example of the era in which it competed. The Superstock Ultrastock class in the AHRA was actually run by NASCAR and featured many of the all-time greats, including Sam, Don Nicholson, Soxon Martin, and Bill Jenkins. During its only season under the ownership of Auxier, his 1969 Ultrastock Mustang grabbed the 69 Cars magazine shootout title by downing some of the biggest names in the sport, and was once featured in Hot Rod, Carcraft, and Superstock magazines. The Mustang was built by Auxier, who did the engines along with chassis man Chuck Danino. Under the hood was a Tunnel Port 427 with an 8-barrel carburetor configuration backed by a top-loader 4-speed transmission with Nash gears. The Mustang, along with the Mavericks that Sam built and drove, made him one of the true kings of drag racing. And those who appear on his weekly podcast are the who's who among car racing's finest.
Frank's changed this.
He's a changing guy.
Is it safe to say that drag racing was in your DNA, in your blood, not just because of your father's involvement, your brother, but it was in your DNA?
Well, let me start back a little bit. It actually wasn't in my beginning. We lived out in the country, Silver Spring, Maryland. We actually called it Aspen Hill, Maryland, just a wide place in the road, little country road. And we had a house there. It was a little clump of 5 houses. So next door to me was Gene and Dale Smith. They were stock car racers.
Yes.
Okay. They lived next door, and they had a 39 Ford stock car coupe, flathead Ford. And they would run at Hagerstown Speedway.
Right.
And they'd run over Dorsey Speedway. Mm-hmm. Well, when they'd go to Hagerstown Speedway, I would beg them to take me. Whenever 75 and 80 opened up in 1960, I became a fan of that because I could do it myself, and I wound up having a car or two at that time. So that made it much easier to get involved. By then, the 64 Comet AFX car, I became involved with that. That's quite a crazy story how I got involved with that, but it was when I was young and I was still in high school, or just about the end of high school. I was going down to see my girlfriend across the way. Well, what they called the garage was just like 2 horse barns that you open up this way. They didn't have roll-up doors or nothing. So anyway, at night I get off work. I worked down at 14th and Irving, downtown D.C. at Blank Pontiac. So I'd get off work, I'd head to Frederick. That was really my start of any professional racing. And after that, it just sort of I don't know. I seem to be in the right place at the right time. That's all. And I guess that's everybody's story.
You recognized good opportunities when they came along.
Well, you didn't even really know it was that kind of opportunity. It just evolved into an opportunity.
You became a household name once that 69 Ultra stock that you had. That sort of made you a household name, didn't it?
Yeah. And Ford gave us a body in white, and we fabricated that into a Ultra stock, which was pre-Pro stock at that time, and that car probably put us on the map, and that's when people started noticing magazine articles. I still have today. I have the last article was 2018 Carcraft. That one of the last issues that Carcraft actually did a paper back cover, and they came up with a whole 5-page spread on that car, And 69, after we built that car, we won Cars Magazine meet again against every competitor that we could ever imagine, and including we ran Bill Jenkins in the final again, and. Or I am back from Barrett-Jackson in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I know a lot of people had some questions or comments and all that, and I'm going to try and explain some of it so everyone realizes what took place, and I think most people did. But anyway, we were honored to be there. It was a once in a lifetime experience for me. It was incredible how they do this, and as enormous as this whole, whatever you see the pictures of, it's twice as big as that. This is my track that I started on when I was, 2 years from getting out of high school. So this is probably when I was 17 years old. I came up here. This is the first racetrack I'd ever been to for a drag strip. Went to a lot of NASCAR deals, but not a drag strip. So what you see behind me is the original track. And they put in a concrete starting system. But back when I started, we had a flagman that started both cars. He'd point to one, point to the other, and then raise it back up. And there was a lot of iffy starts in that, that whether one cheated or one got away with leaving first. But anyway, guy named Jake. Jake was here, oh gosh, as far as I can remember, forever, let's put it that way. But later on in the 70s, and sometime, I don't remember exactly, but we went and we got what they call the Christmas tree. And the Christmas tree, we started off of that, and that took a press of the starter's button. Jake just needed to push a button and the tree would count down. Later on in years, we did what they call a pro tree, and whenever you staged, it would go, you would stage into the two lights, and he'd hit the button, and the last lights would come on. So there was no timing of the deal. You were ready to go whenever that happened. So anyway, back behind me. You got 2 lanes, and generally we flipped a coin for the start of the, if it was a match race, we flipped a coin, see who starts in the right lane, left lane, or whatever lane that you felt was the best lane for you. That's what we did, you know. So anyway, we tried to hedge on that as much as we could, get that right lane, make sure it was the best, cleanest lane without the oil and the oil downs. Because back then, you got to remember, we had a lot of oil downs. Today, we don't have as many oil downs as we used to have, thank God. But so the track is a 1/4 mile, as you can probably tell down there. But today, most tracks are cut down to 1/8 mile due to the dangers and the speed that everyone's racing. All right, we're at the starting line now. Now, let's go back in history a little bit here. And this was not here, and this wasn't here. There was just 2 lanes here, okay? And Jake, the flagman, would stand right about 15 feet over this line here, okay? So he'd be up in here, and he would point to each car, next car, bring to the center, and then raise the flag. Well, Ronnie Socks had that figured out pretty good. I think him and Jake both had it figured out pretty good. But anyway, that was it. And that was a pretty dangerous job when you think you're going to stand between these 2 cars that probably, who knows, could swerve one way or the other, break an axle, and they make a hard turn. But anyway, as things progressed through the life of drag racing history, we came up with the starter's booth. Well, the starter's booth, basically, we have timing lights here and here. And now remember, when we did the starting deal, that was the only timing mechanism you had, was the lights here and the lights down the finish line, and that gave us our speed and gave us our ET. But early on, basically, we had just who won. We had a guy standing down there that was supposed to tell us who won. So that was a little iffy, but on a lot of runs. But anyway, there was a guy down at each end. We had Jake here, and the guy, I don't know who he was, down the other end. So, but as things progressed, and we had a Christmas tree, okay, all the non-pro classes ran a 5-bulb Christmas tree. So you'd stage the lights, you'd stage into 2 yellow beams. That meant you were staged, ready to go. And he would hit the button and it would count down, okay? And the last pair was green, obviously. Pair before that was red. So if you went too quick, you red lighted. Automatic disqualification. You don't have a second chance. Don't even talk about it. Pack your stuff, go home. When I first came here, 1960, they had some stands here. Over to my right was some stands that had a sheet metal roof on them. People used to sit under there, similar to this, but they were like telephone poles put in the ground, and with boards that were laid on top of them, and that's where you would sit. And the concession stand was back right over there, was the one concession stand, and the other one was across the way there. But this one here, you could get the Sloppy Joes, which Betty's wife took care of the concessions, and everybody, we buy them Sloppy Joes 2 or 3 at a time. Great eating, we loved them. That building over there, across on the left-hand side of the track, was where the information and the announcer would actually announce the race from. And he could read the times, elapsed times and speed from his location. The actual, way down on the end down there on the left was a little hut-like that had the actual timing slip. So a driver would stop down there, and they would pick up their timing slip. And they would read what speed they ran and what ET they ran. So later on, I think they moved a good bit of it down to the other smaller tower on the left down here at the starting line area. So quite a bit of history there.
And then the Maverick came along.
The Mavericks came along,
Mhm.
and we actually built 2 of those Mavericks. Chick Tonino, he did the fabricating work, and then we stuck with Ford. We actually had a weird situation. The other half of the shop was Chrysler and Mopar, and Chick had that department. And of course, they got parts for the Mopar on that side, and we had parts for the Ford on this side. So it was really quite a unique setup. But he did all the fab work on any cars that
And
we
you were
had.
the drivetrain guy.
I was the drivetrain, the transmission, the engines, the clutches, I built the engines. I built the engines on everything, you know, and Mopar or Ford. But we did quite well, and that's a crazy story because early on we had engine problem after engine problem, and it came down to, this is in like '64, early '65. And it came down to one day I said, you know what? I said, I could blow them up myself. I don't need anybody to help me, you know? So sure enough, you know, I said, shoot, I got me some specialty tools, the micrometers and all this stuff. And I said, I'll just do it myself. You know, why pay somebody to do something that's going to blow up? So from there on, I started doing it, and Ford gave me guidance with don't do this and don't do that and do this, and we'll get you every piece you need. And so it really just turned out to be a fantastic ride. We got the Mavericks going. The cameras were limited at that time, but we did get cameras for the one car, and that engine was my favorite engine of any Ford Motor Company engine there was. It was the Cammer, 427 Cammer. So that car became one of our first with the Cammer engines in it, and then we went on to have a '71 Mustang Pro Stock car. Did quite well with that. The Mavericks got ungodly amount of press.
Yes.
I have no idea why, but they got ungodly amount of press, and of course we didn't turn it down. We took everything you could get on the press department, good or bad.
Is there a driver out there today or within, say, the last decade or so, somebody that you interviewed and you said, that's me? That's me as a young man.
Yeah, there is one, if I can think of it. I did not interview them, but well, yeah, not yet anyway. I would say Ron Capps would be one of them. One that passed away was really the one that got me started, and that's Tom McEwen, Mongoose McEwen. And when I first started, I was really struggling with, you know, I call people up, and my name don't ring a bell right off the hand, you know. And I don't want to be like, don't you know, and you know, But Mongoose calls me and he says, and I hadn't talked to him before, and he says, Sam, you got a paper and pencil? I said, yeah, I got a paper and pencil. Why? You know, write these names down and these telephone numbers.
Oh my!
And you tell them I told you to call. And then after that, it was the key to paradise, you know. So at that point, you know, people wound up knowing who I was. had remembered who I was and all that
Yes,
stuff.
that you laid the groundwork
Yeah. Yeah.
for what we see on television
Yeah.
today that is a
Yeah.
billion-dollar industry. It started in your backyard on that road, either
Yeah.
with the Comet or with the Mustang, but your knowledge also how to build engines and how to make cars. I mean, if you hadn't had that, you wouldn't have had the success
Oh, no,
you had.
no.
You always ask the great ones this question: do you have one race left in you, Sam?
You know, I look at it and, you know, I think of that a lot of times when I see it on TV and or I'm there. And I think, well, if I could do it, and if I was maybe one of 20 people that's there at the track, you know, would I like to do? Yeah, I'd like to do it. Would I like to make a fool out of myself? You know, I don't know. You know, I think one of the, one of the great questions from, I asked one of my interviews to Bob Fry, who announced for NHRA for years, and for 20-some years, 25 years. He retired from being the announcer, and I did. He's one of my best interviews, by the way. And I said, Bob, what would you change in drag racing if you could change anything? Because, of course, he was there looking at every starting line there was. And he says, I'd make them put manual 4-speed transmissions back in pro stock. He said, then I'd want to see who in the hell could drive that car.
Oh my, that's true. That is true.
Right. Yeah. He says,
Oh,
then he says,
that's real driving, isn't it?
we'd take some driving to do it.
Yeah.
We'd see who the good ones were and who the
Yes,
weren't.
who could actually shift.
Right. Because today's cars,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I look at it and it's almost like, to me, all the hard work I did, and clutch work, and transmission work, and I can remember when we first started in early 1970, we had our speed shop at that time, and I remember we had, well, let me back up here. 3 years before then, we were taking gears and grinding the synchro, every other tooth off the synchro. By hand, we ground those gears. And that's how we were able to shift them that fast. Sometimes you almost didn't need a clutch to do it, you know. And so that really was a big, big difference in it. And then along came Doug Nash, and he had a machine shop, and he would cut the synchronizer ring completely off. He'd soften the gear, cut the synchronizer ring completely off of it, and put another dog gear on it, which was big teeth on there. And it was every other tooth, so it was really sloppy whenever you had it put in gear. You couldn't miss the thing. And so we would sell those in the speed shop, and we exchange them. They bring us in gear sets. We give, and we had them for GM, Chrysler, Ford, all works. But one of the things, I don't want to get this in here because of my dad, but one day Jim Kerr, who was a rep, parts rep for Doug Nash, come in the speed shop. And he always came in the shop. He had many other lines he repped. But he says, Doug Nash is out of money. And he says, Doug has a blueprint for a 5-speed transmission. But Doug's don't have the money. He's gone to his dad, who worked at Ford. He's gone to Ford. He's gone to everybody you can think of. Nobody will lend him money. And he's 6 months behind in his bills. So I told my dad, and not that I thought he'd do anything, I was just telling him. And he says, well, what does he need? And Jim said, well, he needs $72,000. Now you can remember in 1970, $72,000?
Like $240
Might as well have
now.
been a month.
Yeah, like a
might as well have been $1
$250,000.
million.
Yeah, you're right.
And so 2 days later, we were on a plane going to Detroit. And that day we landed, got took us to Doug's shop, and we were there to see what kind of deal. And Doug says, all I got is a train. He said, in my house, and we went to his house too. He had a whole wall of Lionel trains on the wall, I mean, this thing. And he said to my dad, he said, all collateral I got is this trains in my house. And my dad said, I'm not in the train business. and he said, I don't want your house. So he said, we're going to shake on this deal, and I'll write you a contract up. So that's how the Doug Nash 5-speed transmission, and eventually winds up in the Corvette
Isn't that
for 2-3 years also.
That's an amazing story.
It's just incredible. I think about my dad. I mean, what he did to launch this deal was incredible.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. And Doug pulled himself out, became, I don't know how wealthy he was, but he was wealthy enough to move the whole operation to Kentucky. And he wound up retiring. And but it was only because of my dad having faith in him that he'd come through on it.
Thank you for joining us on National Arts. We hope you enjoyed meeting Sam Auxier Jr., one of the icons in the sport of drag racing. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.